Story 1. This story is about 11 years old, but a friend reminded me of it today at lunch, and since neither of us are friends anymore with the bride who caused all the chaos, we had a good laugh about it. So here it goes. Roughly 12 years ago, a childhood friend of mine quickly eloped because her boyfriend was dropping out of college and entering the military. About a year later, she decided that it wasn't fair, her go-to phrase that they never had a real wedding, so they would be throwing one now. At this point, I was living overseas, and she asked me to come back home for the wedding and be the co-maid of honor alongside her sister. I told her I would do my best to attend, but international travel was expensive, and I was a broke English teacher. I worked it out so that I would be home right before her wedding, but I let her know that I obviously would not be able to do any of the traditional maid of honor duties since I would only be back about 2 days before the ceremony. She immediately started lecturing me about why I was not coming back sooner or staying longer. To this day, I am not sure why she even asked me to be a maid of honor. We were not all that close by this point, but I think it was because most of our other childhood friends had already stopped talking to her. Fast forward to the wedding. She expected all her bridesmaids to basically do all of the work for decorating and setting up the entire event. And when I say everything, I mean setting up tables and chairs, buying supplies, making decorations, and arranging them. She even expected us to create this elaborate chalk design vision she had in her head outside the venue that was extremely complex. It was 98 degrees outside. We spent 2 full days of nonstop labor, mostly outside in the awful heat. Then came the rehearsal. I was supposed to carry the flower girl down the aisle as part of the ceremony. I did this, and the little girl accidentally peed all over me. No problem, I understood things like that happen. I quickly walked inside the venue to clean up and change clothes. The only issue was that the bride had demanded that all the bridesmaids wear a certain color for the rehearsal, and the only dress I had in that color aquamarine now had pee on it. The only other dress in my luggage was a light tan one, think khaki colored, so I put that on. Immediately, total chaos erupted as the bride accused me of trying to upstage her by wearing a dress that was too close to white. She insisted that I wear a dress another bridesmaid had packed, even though it was about 4 sizes too big for me, simply because it was the correct color. And keep in mind, this was only for the rehearsal dinner, not the actual wedding. Being a good sport, I put on the borrowed dress and tied a belt around it to keep it from literally falling off. The bride went on for years afterward claiming that I had tried to upstage her in that moment, as if I had somehow asked a toddler to pee on me. In any case, the marriage did not last. It was over in less than 5 years. Her husband ended up cheating on her after she quit her job, refused to work, used money his parents had given him for a car down payment to pay off her loans, physically blocked him from leaving their house when they got into arguments, and even called the police to claim he had hit her. I would never condone cheating, but I have to admit I can see why he wanted out. To make matters worse, she later called his commanding officer and told them that she knew her soon-to-be ex-husband was going to harm himself, which led to him being placed on leave. He was in no way suicidal. She later admitted she had lied just to get revenge. Needless to say, we are not friends anymore. Story 2. I have a female dog and male dog. The two are both great and really support me when I have nothing to do in the pandemic. Just note, this story goes way back in 2019 and in the UK, so I don't completely know the dialogue. And the male dog wasn't neutered at that time, but I got the female dog 3 months ago in 2019, so she didn't completely love the male dog, but in today's time, he is neutered and I have 7 cute puppies. Anyway, on to the cast. Me, male dog, female dog, the entitled mother also known as Devil's Assistant, her nice kid, and the police officer. Like, what do you expect? So it's a nice day in 2019, and I had nothing to do, so my male and female dogs, and I went to a park primarily for dogs. Pretty much almost every family there has a dog, and is a quite popular park, with a children play area of course, with open areas to play around with dogs, and other pets too. So I found a quite big area with a lake next to it, and played who could catch the ball first. Enter the star of story coming near me. Entitled Mother, hey, I have part of this area? Me, oh yes, no problem. I forget to mention they do have a dog, but it isn't a big part of the story. Her, these dogs look adorable, could my kid pet him? Of course. The nice kid looked like a 6-8-year-old kid with ginger hair, also looked kind of shy. What kind of dogs are they? Are they easy to find? Well, one's is male and other one is female and… Wait, what? Was there something? In a quick rush, she asks, is the male dog neutered? Ooh, no. I should not have said their genders. Oh my God, that's illegal. How come? You idiot. They are going to do stuff together, so you better go to a vet now. Look, if these dogs are bothering you, you should go to the other side of the lake. You what? Eventually she cooled down, then does something I would never forget. She ran and clutched the male dog and yanked him and ran far away. Instantly I ran after her with the female dog running faster. Luckily, the female dog got the entitled mother to trip over. I didn't care if the entitled mother was hurt. I just wanted to get out of here and be dealt with. But when I get in my position to run, I heard a stop. The entitled mother does the smart Karen trick, shouting, I stole her my dog and I kicked her. I thought I messed up. Police officer, what's going on? I heard a shout going on. I instantly said before she can get any words in, she tried to steal my dog. Well, I was able to witness half of it, and ma'am, you have to leave now. Thank you, Lord. Me. Wait, what about your kid? The entitled mother. Oh. She tried to run, but couldn't, so the police officer had to escort her to her kid. 7 away. The kid was there with another dog playing catch, so at least he was entertained, while his mother got chased by some average-weight 19-year-old man. Of course, I pressed charges on her, and another thing I would never forget when being escorted by the police officer. The entitled mother tried to flip me off, but the police officer slapped her hand down. Ever since that happened, I had kinda got anxiety when taking my dogs in public, but it took a couple of weeks to get past that. Let's hope I don't see that brat again. Story 3. I've given up and decided to embrace the constant jokes about my name in memes, but I declare myself to be a little K-Korner, which is an entirely different species. Ha! This past weekend, I was back in my hometown and drove past the branch library where I had spent so much of my youth. That sight reminded me of this story. I very rarely had to go downtown to the main library building, which was 5 stories tall and covered almost an entire city block. But on this particular day, I was in the main reading room doing some research. As usual, the room had quite a few unhoused individuals, most of them keeping to themselves and simply enjoying the air conditioning. It was brutally hot that day. There were several rows of rectangular tables, each with 6 chairs, so there was plenty of space for people to spread out. Suddenly, I heard this loud, plop sound. An armload of magazines slammed down on the table across from me. A woman, let's call her Karen, sat down and only then asked if she could share the table, making it clear that she did not want to sit near the unhoused people. I don't recall her exact words, but she wasn't trying to be subtle or quiet. Several other occupied tables were well within earshot. She sat there for about 25 minutes and never stopped talking. She spread the magazines, mostly cooking magazines, across the entire table. She wanted to talk about recipes. She wanted to declare her love for some grocery store she used to visit back home that, in her words, makes Publix look awful. She wanted to complain about how unpleasant the city was. And more than anything, she wanted to criticize the library for letting in people she didn't approve of. I tried my best to just nod and respond with and aha, instead of actually answering her, hoping she would eventually quiet down. But my simmering dislike of her escalated to full frustration when she began tearing recipes out of the magazines. I finally looked her directly in the eye and told her to stop. She started to sputter, and I said, "Why not just take pictures with your phone?" She sat there vibrating with indignation for about 20 seconds, and then decided that my behavior was too offensive for her to endure. She slammed her things together, leaving the half-destroyed magazines in a messy pile, and then made a dramatic exit. As she walked away, I noticed she had left a notebook on the table. I thought about it for a moment, then picked it up, ran after her, and handed it to her with an overly sweet tone. "You forgot this." She had no choice but to pretend to be thankful. Pretty anticlimactic, right? But wait. Here's the important detail about this library. Parking was in a giant garage about a block and a half away. Library patrons could park there for 3 hours free if they had a validation slip from the library. You handed your parking ticket to the reference desk, and they would staple the validation slip to it. No slip. You paid the hourly rate listed on your stamped ticket, which was about $2.50 per hour. No ticket at all. You had to pay the daily rate, which at that time was about $20. When I picked up Karen's notebook, I could see the little parking ticket sticking out of the top, with the validation slip stapled to it. And when I handed her notebook back, well, let's just say that ticket somehow wasn't there anymore. What a shame. Hopefully she had a $20 bill tucked away in that oversized purse. Story 4. I take care of everyone else in my family. When my mother-in-law needed help getting around, I stepped up. She was in her 80s and hated flying alone, so when she wanted to visit us or go back home, I made the trip with her. It wasn't a burden at all. I genuinely loved that woman. She had this way of making even boring conversations interesting, and the airline miles didn't hurt either. This incident happened in 2004 when I was flying back home after dropping her off. It was supposed to be a simple 75-minute flight, nothing fancy. I always booked aisle seats because I'm not exactly a small guy, and I like having the extra room to stretch out. Plus, I hate feeling trapped in the middle or by the window. When I got to my row, there was already a guy sitting in the middle seat. He looked like he was in his 40s, wearing a wrinkled business shirt, and had this attitude like he owned the entire plane. Before I even sat down, I could see this was going to be a problem. His legs were spread wide, taking up way more space than any normal person would need. I asked him if he could make a little room so I could get to my seat. He just looked at me like I had asked him to donate a kidney and went back to whatever he was reading. Didn't budge an inch. I figured maybe he didn't hear me properly, so I said excuse me again and mentioned I needed to get to my seat. This time he looked up with an annoyed expression and shifted maybe half an inch. That was it. I squeezed past him and tried to settle into my aisle seat, but it was immediately clear this flight was going to be miserable. This guy had claimed both armrests and was manspreading so hard that his leg was pressing against mine. Not just touching, actively pushing against me like he was trying to claim my seat too. I tried pushing back, thinking maybe he'd get the hint and give me some space. Instead, he pushed back even harder. It was like some weird territorial battle happening 30,000 feet in the air. His elbow was digging into my ribs from the armrest, and his knee kept bumping into mine every few seconds. The flight attendant was doing her pre-flight checks, walking up and down the aisle. I knew I had to do something before we took off, or I'd be stuck dealing with this the entire flight. When she got close enough, I made sure my voice carried and loudly told the guy to stop trying to play footsie with me because I wasn't interested. The guy's face went bright red and he actually sputtered a little bit. He moved his leg away from mine, but only by about an inch. The flight attendant gave us both a look but didn't say anything. After takeoff, once the seatbelt sign went off, this guy spread out like he was sitting in his living room. Now it was even worse than before. His leg was pressing against mine with what felt like deliberate force, and he had both armrests locked down tight. I could feel him pushing into my space with his shoulder too. I tried to be patient. I really did. But this was ridiculous. I unbuckled my seatbelt, stood up quickly, and yelled at him to stop touching me. I told him loudly that I'd asked him nicely to give me some space, and he kept pushing against me anyway. The reaction was immediate. The flight attendant came rushing over, and I could see the air marshal moving toward us from a few rows back. The middle seat guy was opening and closing his mouth like a fish, trying to figure out what to say. The flight attendant asked what the problem was, and I explained that this guy kept rubbing his leg against mine and wouldn't stop even after I'd told him multiple times to give me some room. Before the middle seat guy could defend himself, the passenger by the window spoke up and said the guy was doing the same thing to him on his side. He mentioned that he didn't want to say anything before, but the middle seat passenger had been pushing against him the whole time too. The air marshal stepped in at that point and had a quiet conversation with the middle seat guy. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught phrases like personal space and other passengers' comfort. Within a few minutes, they were walking him away from our row. The middle seat guy protested the whole time, saying it was ridiculous and that he wasn't doing anything wrong. He kept insisting that he paid for his seat just like everyone else. The air marshal told him he needed to come along. They moved him to what looked like a jump seat near the back of the plane, right next to where the air marshal had been sitting. I watched as they strapped him in, and he kept looking back at our row with an angry expression. The flight attendant came back a few minutes later with a smile and apologized for the inconvenience. She offered both me and the window seat passenger a complimentary alcoholic beverage for our trouble. The window seat guy and I both accepted immediately. Free beer on a flight? That definitely made up for the drama. We ended up having a pretty decent conversation for the rest of the trip. Turns out he was a teacher heading home from a conference, and he'd been dealing with the same pushing and shoving from the middle seat guy, but was too polite to say anything. About 20 minutes before we were supposed to land, the air marshal came back to our row and asked if I wanted to press charges against that passenger. I thought about it for a second, but honestly, I just wanted the flight to be over. I told him no, that I didn't think it was necessary, and I was just glad the guy wasn't bothering us anymore. The window seat guy said the same thing. We figured that was that. The guy had learned his lesson and hopefully wouldn't pull the same stunt on future flights. After we landed and everyone was getting off the plane, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. The middle seat guy was standing near the gate in handcuffs, with 2 police officers and the flight attendant talking nearby. The air marshal noticed me staring and walked over. I asked him what had happened since we weren't pressing charges. He explained that I wasn't pressing charges, but the flight attendant was. After they moved the middle seat guy, he had called her some pretty nasty names and made what she felt was a threat of physical harm. She decided to press assault charges because of that. He asked me one more time if I wanted to add anything to the charges, but I declined. The guy was already in enough trouble, and I just wanted to get home. When I walked past him toward the exit, I chuckled a little bit. He saw me looking and glared, but there wasn't much he could do about it from behind those handcuffs. Story 5. Let me preface this with my actual field. I work in information technology, and I have worked in it all my life. This happened about 6 years ago. I have told it to friends, and I have had several debates over it. One time, after getting off work, I went into a store whose name rhymes with small tart. I was confronted by an angry manager, whom we will call Sam from now on. I went in one afternoon with a short list of higher ticket items, a laptop, a drill, and about 24 cables of various descriptions. My cart was loaded with the drill and the cables. I approached the electronics service desk and requested my laptop when I was very rudely spun around forcefully by Sam. He scowled at me and said, "Son, why are you out on the floor out of uniform? Get back to the break room, change, and be ready in 5 minutes." Me, with my brain still spinning in my head, took about 6 seconds to reply, "I'm sorry, what?" "Get back to work," he screamed, moving his face so far into my space that I was forced to lean back onto the electronics counter. I replied, "Sir, I don't work for you. I'm an administrator for a completely unrelated company." This set Sam off. Oh boy, did this set him off. Sam grabbed me and literally frog marched me back into the employees' area, all the way to the lockers, and shouted in my ear, "Which one is yours?" Before I could answer, he said, "Never mind, I'll find out myself," and snatched my wallet out of my pocket. He sat me down and went off to the office. Well, I assumed he was going to look up my name. I sat there, scared and confused, in the break and locker room for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, a security guard came in and sat by me. She started her usual line of questioning. "What did you steal?" I replied, "Nothing, miss. The manager, Sam, believes I work here. He stormed me back here, sat me down, and ran off with my wallet." The security guard didn't believe me. She said the obvious. "That's ridiculous. Sam knows everyone who works here. You're obviously a thief if you're back here sweating bullets." About 3 seconds later, Sam screamed in frustration, and the security guard hopped up, telling me to stay put. She ran toward the office. Sam could clearly be heard yelling, "This silly machine, it's broken again, egg." Sam and security came back. At the door, the security guard asked Sam, "So what did this guy try to take?" Sam turned to her with a look like he wanted to yell, "Are you clueless, woman?" and instead blurted out, "Time." The security guard shook her head, looked at me, then at Sam, and back at me with a face that said, "Wait, you're not joking with me, are you?" She immediately told Sam, "I don't think he works here, boss." This upset Sam even more. Now turning beet red, he screamed, "I'll get to the bottom of this. And you," Sam pointed a shaky, bony finger at me, "I'll make sure you never work in retail again." Now that I had a moment to process the absurdity of it all, I said, "Fine." Sam glared at me before huffing and stomping off to his office again. The security guard sat with me again and shook her head. "Holy smokes, Sam's off the deep end. Maybe you should just leave. I'll escort you out." At this point, I would have happily taken her offer and headed for the hills. However, I had just been robbed of my wallet, and I told security as much. I had never actually seen someone's eye twitch shut in real life before, but hers did. She said, "He took your wallet?" I nodded my affirmation. Before she could say anything else, Sam walked out, smug and grumpy as ever. "Now, I just called the district manager. You will be fired, and you'll never work here again, you hear me?" I opened my mouth, but security spoke first. "Sam, he doesn't work here. You're about to get fired." Sam's anger was now fully focused on security. "Now listen here, I'm writing you up too, because you're supposed to be out on the floor making sure people aren't robbing my store blind, not socializing with ex-employees." Security went quiet, and we sat for what felt like another eternity until the district manager finally showed up. The district manager finally walked in and said, "Okay, Sam, what's this about an employee not doing their job and then saying they don't work here? Why are you wasting my time?" Sam explained with a huge smile while also mentioning that he wanted me blacklisted. The district manager came and sat by me. He opened a laptop and asked, "Okay, man, give me your wallet." I replied, "I can't, sir." "Why is that?" he asked. "Sam took my wallet and hasn't given it back." "All right, hold on," he said, then stood up and took Sam back into the manager's office. A moment later, both I and security heard the district manager explode. "You what?" It turned out Sam had put my wallet in the ledger safe, which was on a 6-hour timer. A few other employees scrambled into the room like birds fleeing to a tree from a hungry cat. We all got an earful of the dress down the district manager was giving Sam. You're done? You're fired, Sam. I have to call corporate and get an override on this safe." "That's a customer, Sam. You basically detained a customer and took his wallet. I can't fathom what you were thinking." "No, don't open your mouth. Pack up. You're out, now." 5 minutes later, after many loud "I knows" and "yes, that's rights" directed at his own boss, the district manager returned with my wallet. He apologized to me and asked if there was anything he could do to make things right. I told him my order, and he got the picture. I walked out of that store with a free laptop and cables. I did have to pay for the drill because those were sold on commission, and the district manager couldn't comp me that item. To this day, I only hope Sam didn't end up alone and broke. I really did feel bad, but in the end, he dug his own hole. Story 6. First off, on mobile, non-English speakers. Second, unfortunately, this story came back to mind due to the recent death of the hero of the story. Grumpy, you will be missed. I've met Grumpy in Narcotics Anonymous. He volunteered there after they helped him and became my sponsor. Seeing that I was trying to get my life together, he offered me my first job out of high school. Grumpy was the manager of a store for a company that sold everything you needed to build a house, from cement and bricks to custom-made cupboards. I started as a loader, filling the trucks that were making deliveries. A little background for the company: it plays an important role later. When they started, back in the early 80s, they sold everything you needed to build a brick-and-mortar home wholesale to professionals. During their first expansion, they got a really good reputation for their prices of power tools, custom cupboards, and landscaping, including custom-made garden furnitures. The stores were basically big warehouses. In mid-90s, they opened their doors to the general public, which, accompanied by a rising tent of DIY, skyrocketed their sales. That brought a second, smaller wave of expansion and the opening of the online store, first only with phone orders and later with a proper site. When I joined, they were doing a third shift on their business plan. They had cut down on things that weren't a big seller, like bricks and concrete, and were focusing more on the big sellers: custom-made furniture, landscaping, tools, and, for some weird reason, plumbing. My first 8 months on the job was a dream. Grumpy was an excellent manager. Having started in the company roughly the same age I was and being promoted through the ranks, had developed a very distinct managerial style. His concept was simple: if my employees are happy, they work better and provide better services, which leads to better sales. That meant that while Grumpy managed one of the inner-city stores, meaning medium to small size compared to others, we were fourth in revenue nationwide and first in customer happiness. And then the reason for his nickname Stroke. While everyone called him Grumpy, a nickname he was kind of proud of, he was far from it. The reason was he had a medical condition that affected his nerves and had left him with a permanent frown on his face. He had declined promotion due to that condition, knowing the extra stress would make his condition flare up, meaning he wouldn't be as effective as he would like. His medical condition flared up unexpectedly and Grumpy had to be hospitalized and be on sick leave for a time. HQ decided to not have one of Grumpy's assistants be an acting manager for the duration, but bring in a regional manager to take over the store for the duration. Let's call him Wilhelm. Wilhelm was the exact opposite of Grumpy. He was younger than Grumpy. He was in his late 20s. Grumpy was in his late 30s, had a business degree, and he hadn't worked the floor at all. He was hired from the beginning as an office drone and climbed his way to regional manager. The reason he was put in charge of our store had to do with the change of the business plan of the company. You see, the change of focus had created a lot of empty space in the stores. A supermarket chain had approached the company with an offer to rent the empty space, especially for inner-city stores. The company had accepted and placed regional managers in key stores to help with integration. The thing is, the supermarket chain had a reputation of being bad employers. That was reinforced by one of our tellers, who had worked for them for 3 years before quitting to join us. Wilhelm didn't help also. His managerial style was based on only one concept: make more money in any way possible. He started by changing our schedule from monthly to weekly, raising the sales targets to unrealistic heights, and always demanded more. In the first 2 weeks, 6 experienced people had left, 4 quitted and 2 fired and replaced by young, inexperienced people that were easier to manipulate. And then, the integration happened. The floor was the first to feel the problem. The supermarket opened its doors and was understaffed. Wilhelm started sending people over to help for 4 to 6 hours, while also demanding to work their regular shifts. If someone declined, Hesh was written up. 2 write-ups in 6 months and you were fired. Then Wilhelm came to lay the law in the loading bay. The loading bay was shared between the 2 stores. Wilhelm declared that we had first helped the 2 guys of the supermarket unload their trucks first, because their products were perishable, and then started loading our own trucks. That would throw our delivery schedule to the wind. The loading crew worked 5 o'clock to 13 o'clock. We loaded first the trucks that had longer to travel, so they will be ready to leave at 7 o'clock at the latest. The company had a next-day delivery policy for a 150 miles radius. What Wilhelm declared meant we couldn't start loading our trucks before 7:30 and they couldn't start their route before 9:30. We said as much, but Wilhelm didn't care. He said we had to do both jobs. When someone inquired about overtime, Wilhelm said no. He said we already made too much money with unsocial hours 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock and leaving early, so he wouldn't approve overtime. So, from a nice environment that you wanted to work for, we all started getting miserable. We lost 10 people in the loading crew in a month because of the new rules. The new hires didn't last long. The floor was a mess also, and started turning personnel faster than a dollar hooker. Anyone who is staying is either looking for another job, is afraid of unemployment, or is too young to know better. The sales had a very small decline, but customer happiness is plummeting fast. After almost 6 months, all the old guard that was left was ready to quit. But our savior came back. Almost 6 months from the day he was hospitalized, Grumpy walks in the store to claim his rightful position. He isn't a knight in shining armor, riding a pure white horse, carrying a legendary sword. He is in a normal attire, slightly limping and holding a cane. We have a welcome back party and have a small glimmer of hope now he is back. We are informed that Grumpy will be on light duties for 2 weeks, before he becomes the manager again. Despite Grumpy being back, Wilhelm still remains the regional manager, which means he outranks Grumpy and makes it very clear in private meetings with all of us. If he caught us complaining to Grumpy, we were as good as gone. Still, a few of us are planning to have a meeting with Grumpy after the weeks, letting him get his sea legs back. But another department had other ideas. During his reign of terror, the only department that Wilhelm couldn't control was the workshop. He knew that if he treated them as badly as he did to us, they would quit and the sales would go from a small decline to bottom of the barrel real quick. As I said, custom-made furniture was the #1 seller. So, the head carpenter has a meeting with Grumpy on his second day talking about the future of the workshop. In reality, the guy spilled the beans on Wilhelm. With a pretext of catching up with the changes, Grumpy has meetings with everyone, learning what Wilhelm had done and why we had so many new staff. You could feel he was getting angrier with every meeting. He had also had an eye-opening meeting with the manager of the supermarket. Finally, the time had come that he was the manager again. The revenge. On his first day back as a manager, Grumpy notifies everyone of a mandatory meeting after the store is closed. He has a solution, so gather in the store after closing hours, and Grumpy lays out the plan. For the next couple of days, nobody except him is coming to the store. If anyone calls us, we should direct them to him. Which we did when we started getting calls about the store being closed. Grumpy's answer to the HQ was simple. The staff was working on a second job during their shifts, which is a breach of contract, so I had to fire them all and find new staff. That caught HQ's attention, because nothing of the sort was reported in the past 6 months. They asked Grumpy for evidence, which he happily provided with our written testimonies, which brought a crapstorm on Wilhelm. You see, Wilhelm had an arrangement with a supermarket manager. He got a kickback from our unpaid labor for the supermarket, and the manager offered the same thing to Grumpy. He also included that Wilhelm regularly declined to sign overtime, which meant that if any one of us went to the labor department, the company would get a really huge fine. The aftermath. Wilhelm quickly got fired. We all received calls to interview with the company for an open position. We all received severance pay for our firing plus most of the unpaid overtime, about 80% of it. almost all of us went back to work with a small pay raise based on experience. The company took a long, hard look at the supermarket chain and distanced themselves from them. They stayed until their lease was over, but no shared employees anymore, and a lot of theirs jumped ship to our side. Next time Grumpy had to take time off, one of his assistants took over. Two did a stellar job, leading to be promoted to managers in other stores. Grumpy brought back his usual managerial style, leading again to a rise of sales and customer happiness. I left the job 3 years later for a better paying position, but I still remember Grumpy as one of the best managers I ever had.